Group Fitness Fundamentals, Monitoring Intensity, Chapter 6. When you're teaching any type of fitness class, it's one of the most important roles you have is to make sure that you are getting people to check in on how they're feeling to make the workout safe and effective. It's your responsibility to remind people to think about how they're feeling so they can adjust their workouts to make it harder or easier so that it's appropriate for whatever level that they're at. So that self-monitoring should be encouraged. So describing how they should feel in a certain section of a class. So if you want them to be working really, really hard, it's an all-out effort, you should be able to get to about 30 seconds and you should need to slow down or stop. Or I want you to feel like you could maintain this intensity for a long time, you're challenged and uncomfortable, and you're happy when it's done, but you could go longer if you had to. Or you should feel like you're just warming up, the body's just getting ready, not working too hard, just getting the joints moving and the blood flowing. So use descriptive terms for them so they know where they're at. When you're teaching a class, make sure you show all intensity levels, all the options, and stay in the mid-range so that you can go up or down depending on what you see your participants doing. If you see the people that are usually advanced, choosing to be advanced, their higher intensity options are kind of lagging a little bit, you can go up and remind them. And same thing with the beginners. If you see them struggling with coordination or they're losing their technique or form because they're choosing something that's too hard, you can slide down and show them the easier level. So it's important to make sure you know who usually works at what level, and if they're not working at a level that they normally work at, you go talk to them to find out why. Maybe they had a tough workout yesterday, or they're not feeling good, or they just forgot. And always remind your participants that intensity is their job. You can give the options, but you cannot work for them. So it's their responsibility to make sure they choose whatever is appropriate for them that day. You need to use your powers of observation so that you can see what people are doing and make sure that they stay safe. Where are we? There we go. You have to be aware of what's normal for your participants and ask questions if something is not normal. So for someone who has an extremely red face and they don't normally, ask how they're feeling. You have to kind of watch. So these are the normal signs of exercise for a cardiovascular class. So you feel your breathing go up, your body temperature increases, you start to sweat a little bit. You have that sensation of heart rate increasing, kind of feel like a little pounding in the chest. You might get a little fatigue in the arms and the legs. That's normal, but you still can manage and keep up. And you feel challenged but comfortable. You could do this for a long time. Slight change in coloring, so they might get a little pinker, but they can still talk to you. They can still verbally respond to questions. So those things will change if people need to slow down. So if you see people or you want to cue in advance on when people should be slowing down, these are the things you should be looking and reminding them about. So if they're out of breath, if they start to overheat, if they start to sweat a lot, just be aware of perspiration. It's not necessarily a level of effort because some people are just heavy sweaters and they just sweat regardless of where they are in the class or how hard they're working. Some people have to change their shirt halfway through the class because they're so sweaty, and that's normal for them. So that isn't just something on its own that can be used as a slow down mechanism, but in combination with other things, or it's not normal. Excessive heart rate, where you feel your heart racing, that's not a good thing. If they're not able to keep up or they have a prolonged cramp or a stitch, cramps usually happen in the calf. So there's like a tightness in the calf and it's uncomfortable to move. If someone gets a cramp in the calf, or sometimes they get it in the neck and the trapezius muscle along the neck, they need to keep moving, slowing down, and once they've cooled down a little bit, then they can stretch it. It's not a good idea just to stop suddenly and stretch. You'll get into that venous cooling and the lightheadedness and the dizziness. So make sure that they slow down slowly and then stretch out that muscle. Stitches usually happen along the ribs, and it's generally caused by not breathing deep enough. You start to breathe to the chest and not to the bottom of the abdomen via the diaphragm. So make sure that their breathing goes from shallow to deep. They slow down a little bit and really focus on getting lots of deep breaths into their lungs, and that should help with the stitch. Sometimes adding a little pressure on the stitch as well, it will push, it will help. They go to experiencing discomfort where they're feeling like, no, this is stopped being fun about 2 minutes ago, and they're not able to keep up. People that get a very, very red face, again, this can be normal for some people. Some people get very red, rosy cheeks when they work out. So again, if it's not normal, then that's something to focus on and worry about. And if they have trouble responding to you where they can't get words out, 3 to 5 words is usually the standard. So if they can't respond that way, then they probably need to slow down. And finally, if you notice people are getting into the next column, then they should be stopping exercising. If they stop breathing, they get cold and clammy, they stop sweating, which is a sign of body shutting down, which is not a good thing. Tightness in the chest, if they're dizzy, lightheaded, or have some nausea. If they have any type of pain anywhere, if they get pale or turn white and they cannot respond to you, that's when they should be stopping, and you should be probably taking into some first aid protocols at that point. So those are the signs you watch for, cueing what's normal, what they should feel, and then what they should look for if they should start to slow down. So this is a review from Fitness Theory, taking a pulse. You always use your fingers, not your thumb, because the thumb has a pulse of its own, and usually use the index and middle fingers together. The carotid artery is the one at the neck, so you go grab your ear, go halfway down the neck and towards the throat in the little notch by the esophagus. Make sure you don't press too hard because it is pressure sensitive. If you press hard on this artery, then the automatic reflex is that it makes you pass out, so that you're not putting pressure on there because it's the main vein or main artery to the brain. So sometimes it's better to take it from the radial pulse, that's from the wrist. So you have your wrist in neutral with the palm up in that supinated position. You run your fingers over the tendons that run over the front of the wrist, and you put your fingers to the tendons, and then towards the thumb side of the tendons, there's a little notch at the wrist. That's probably the best place to get your radial pulse. So you don't press too hard just so you feel it. And I would suggest turning off the music when you take a pulse in a class, just because some people start to count the music as opposed to the beats that they feel. But honestly, most instructors haven't taken a heart rate check this way in a long time, but it is a tool you can use. Make sure you tell your participants to keep the feet moving. They'll stop their feet to count, so you have to get them just walking around or something because you don't want that venous pooling in the legs. Heart rate checks are not great for advanced participants because they are so adapted with their body. Their body reacts to change in stimulus so quickly that their heart rate will drop significantly when they stop moving. Your unfit people, it will probably be a valid measure of effort. However, if they stop moving their feet, they'll probably be lightheaded or dizzy, so that feet moving is really, really important. So you count for 10 seconds. The first beat you feel is 0, and you multiply that by 6 to get beats per minute. And you probably have a chart in your studio room or on your bikes or somewhere that people can see that they can compare their age to where their heart rate is. Heart rate monitors are probably the easiest version, so if you have access to them in your facility, use them. The bikes with the computer consoles tend to have a heart rate monitor built in, so you just have to wear the strap and it reads it right onto the bike. Or people could wear the heart rate monitor strap and wear the watch. Either or, both work really well. So calculating heart rate, so if you need to get people to do this in advance so they know when they're taking their pulse or monitoring their heart rate, what range they're in. You have maximum heart rate, which is 220 subtract age. And this is just a best guess, so it could be plus or minus 10 to 12 beats either way. So it's a good guess, but it's only based on age and nothing else. You could have a really fit, 50-year-old where this formula would not be appropriate. They wouldn't be working or feel like they're working hard enough. So it's a best guess. So target heart rate, using that formula, you take the maximum heart rate times the percentage you want to work. And in Canada, we use the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology guidelines of 60 to 90%. So you do the math at 60 and at 90, and then you get a range of heart rate. So anywhere in between the 60 to 90% is they're going to be getting effective work. If you want to get more specific, as reviewed in fitness theory, you can use the Carbonin formula. It's more accurate because you incorporate a person's fitness level via the resting heart rate. So you need to have the resting heart rate available to you, and you have to give people homework, and for 3 days usually is a good number, and they take it before they get out of bed when they're closest to resting, and then they average it. That gives a good best average of what their resting heart rate is. So you still need maximum heart rate, 220 subtract age, but now you have calculate what's called heart rate reserve. So you take that maximum heart rate number and you take the resting heart rate out. You subtract it. Then you multiply that heart rate reserve times the same percentages, 60 and 90%, and then you add the resting heart rate back in. So it does make a difference. It actually, for a fit person, if you did their target heart rate and then the Carbonin, you'll probably see a big difference in the 60% intensity and a smaller difference at the 90. But and those changes do make a big difference in terms of effort. Rate of perceived exertion is probably the most used and most effective means of monitoring intensity with groups of people. You encourage people to listen to their body. They have to pay attention to how they're feeling and then adjust intensity accordingly. Don't leave any kind of heart rate monitoring to the end. Do it in the partway through, like 1/3 and 2/3 through a class, so people can adjust. If you wait too late, then they may have not worked as hard as they could have in the class, and then they may feel like they wasted their time a little bit. So make sure you give them lots of opportunities to adjust and make the workout appropriate for their level. With monitoring intensity, it's making sure you're honest about time, sets, and reps. So I would really avoid saying we're going to do 2 more sets of 60 seconds and then do 3. Or say we're doing 5 repetitions and then, oh, we're going to do 5 more. Just because you want people to give you honest effort and you want them to work as hard as they can in the time you're asking. And if you're not honest, then they're not going to give honest effort. They're going to hold back. So just make sure you keep everyone on the same page and that you really make sure that you're keeping track appropriately of time, reps, and sets. So Borg perceived exertion is one of the main ways that we can keep track of how people are feeling. I find the 6 to 20 chart very hard to use just because people that are lay people don't know what 13 out of 6 to 20 scale means. So another option is a 1 to 10 scale. This scale here, again, a 7 out of 10 as being somewhat hard. Again, that for me anyways, it doesn't kind of jive with how I feel when I'm working out and what I've talked with other people, my participants. So come up with a different scale that maybe is a little bit more user-friendly, and that goes with the percentage heart rate, the maximum heart rate calculations, the 60 to 90%. So 1 to 5 is not really any work. 1 would be sleeping, 5 would be just strolling at the mall. 6 out of 10 will be your warm-up and cool-down intensity, or 60%. So it's not overly work. It's just basically you're getting ready for work. You're not any stressed at any stretch of the imagination. 7 out of 10, challenged and uncomfortable. This is your challenged and comfortable, sorry. This is your 70%. So this is where you're working in a nice aerobic zone. You're in a steady work. It's not overly taxing. You could keep this intensity for a very long time. Very, very aerobic here. 8 out of 10, challenged and uncomfortable, and that should read 80%, 80. So 80% challenged and uncomfortable, where you are basically, you are working, but you are not having any fun. The fun factor goes down significantly, and you are basically, your face changes, you're not smiling, you're not listening to the music anymore, you're not singing along, you are head down and go, where it is work. 9 out of 10, by 2 minutes you must slow down or stop. This is where you are breathless in recovery. It's your 90%. So if you look, and we have 7 and 8 out of 10 is our aerobic intensity. Our 9 out of 10 is our anaerobic lactic, right? We're basically, we have 2 minutes, and then we have either run out of fuel, or the lactic acid, the process of acidosis is making our legs heavy. We cannot go on. It's you have to make a change. The intensity is too high. You're not able to break down ATP anymore. And you will know you've reached that 9 out of 10 because you're puffy in the recovery. You're not puffy during necessarily, but when you turn the resistance down, that's where you start to gasp a little bit, where you're breathless. 10 out of 10, this would be anaerobic lactic, anaerobic alactic. Your all-out effort, 100%. After about 10 seconds, maybe 15, you have to stop. You just can't. You've run out of energy. Your legs can't do it anymore. You're starting to slow down because you can't maintain that intensity. I find this scale works very well on the bike and works very well in your sport conditioning classes, and it works pretty well in the aerobic class. You're in aerobics in a step or a choreography class, you're probably staying in that 7 to 8 out of 10, and you might have blips of 9 out of 10, but mostly you're in that 7, 8. But it works very well, and it corresponds very nicely with your energy systems as well as the percentage maximum heart rate. The talk test, another very effective way to monitor intensity in a large group. Basically being able to carry a conversation about 3 to 5 words per phrase. So if you think of nursery rhymes, those are actually quite good tools to use for talk tests. I use the talk test in combination with other methods. I tend to use the perceived exertion and then ask questions during class. And if I can't get any answers out of people, then they might be working too hard. And basically, you're talking the talk while walking the walk. So it's something where if you can't talk, if you can't while you're working out, then you're probably working too hard. On the DVD, there is a sample of monitoring intensity that you can watch. So reference on page 92 in your manual.